Hello and welcome back to Sleep Veyra, where quiet stories, dreamlike journeys, and gentle nights are created to help you slow down, rest deeply, and drift peacefully into sleep. Tonight, we return once more to ancient Egypt, to the warm darkness beside the Nile, to the quiet house of Menka the physician, where lamps burn softly after midnight, where the river carries moonlight past the reeds, and where those who cannot sleep sometimes find their way to a door that opens not only into a courtyard, but into the hidden rooms of memory, sorrow, and rest. When Menka returned to his house beside the Nile, the city was still asleep, and the small clay cup he had found on his threshold rested in his hands with a strange and gentle weight, as though it had been made not only of fired earth, but of memory, moonlight, and some quiet message the night had not yet finished giving him. He had walked slowly from the house of blue columns, not because the road was difficult and not because the hour was dangerous, but because certain nights should not be left too quickly, especially nights in which grief has spoken aloud, sleep has come near a wounded mother, and a broken stone bird has become, for a little while, a lamp held between the living and the dead. The moon had lowered toward the western roofs by then, and the world was pale with the last silver of night, so that every wall, every closed gate, every palm leaf, every sleeping boat along the bank seemed to belong to the same still breath before morning. Menka entered his courtyard without lighting the lamp he carried, because the moon and the river gave enough light, and because he had always believed that not every darkness must be corrected by flame. Some darkness was only waiting for the eyes to soften. He placed the little clay cup on the shelf beside his jars of honey, blue lotus, cedar oil, myrrh, dried mint, and folded linen, and for a moment he stood before it in silence, studying the way the faint light inside the cup did not fade, even though no moonbeam now touched it. It was an old cup, ordinary in shape and slightly uneven at the rim, the sort of thing that might have been made by a village potter for a child, a kitchen, or a traveler who needed water more than beauty. Yet the cup seemed to hold the night differently from other things. The moonlight inside it did not shine upward like a flame, nor did it reflect as water reflects, but lay quiet and deep within the clay, as though someone had poured a small piece of the sky into it and asked the earth to keep it safe until morning. Menka did not understand it, and because he was old enough to have become patient with what he did not understand, he did not try to force meaning from it before meaning was ready to be given. He washed his hands, folded his travel cloth, closed the wooden gate, and sat for a while in the open room that faced the river, listening to the city sleep. There are hours before dawn when even a busy city becomes honest, when merchants are not yet merchants, scribes are not yet scribes, mothers are not yet calling children from mats, soldiers are not yet lifting shields, priests are not yet arranging offerings, and every person, whether noble or poor, rests for a brief time beneath the same dark roof of sky. Menka loved those hours, though he rarely slept through them, because they reminded him that beneath names, ranks, duties, and all the painted masks of daylight, human beings returned each night to the same fragile condition. Closed eyes, unguarded hands, breath moving in and out as quietly as a reed bending in river wind. He thought of Calm, the scribe who had finally slept on his roof after 40 nights of numbers and invisible calling. He thought of Seisha, lying beneath the open sky beside the pool in the house of blue columns, with the broken ibis, the papyrus of memories, and the blue fish named Old Uncle Morning keeping watch nearby. He thought of Pazer, the boy who had been told by a dead child not to become a shadow before becoming a man, and he thought of the small clay cup in the shelf behind him, holding moonlight as if the world had left a question in his house and trusted him not to answer it too soon. At last, as the first pale line of morning appeared beyond the eastern roofs, Menka slept in his chair, not deeply, but enough for the night to loosen its fingers from his thoughts. When he woke, the city had already begun to stir. A donkey complained in the lane beyond the wall. A woman laughed somewhere near the river steps. A baker struck ash from the mouth of an oven. And from the temple road came the measured steps of men carrying baskets of offerings toward the first prayers of the day. The cup was still on the shelf. At first, Menka saw nothing changed, but when he rose and crossed the room, he noticed that the moonlight inside it had become darker, not gone, not dimmed, but deepened, the way water deepens when one steps from the shallow bank into the middle of the river. He lifted the cup carefully and looked inside. For a moment, there was only pale light within it. Then the light shifted. Menka saw, not with the sharpness of ordinary sight, but with the softened clarity that sometimes belongs to dreams, a passageway made of stone, narrow and cool, descending beneath a row of carved lotus flowers. The walls of the passage seemed wet, though no water moved over them, and along both sides were names, thousands of names, cut into the stone in lines so delicate that each one looked less carved than breathed there by someone afraid to be forgotten. A sound came from the cup then, so faint that Menka almost believed he had imagined it. It was the sound of water moving underground. Then beneath the water, a voice. Not loud, not near, not belonging to any one person. Every name that cannot sleep must be returned to the river. Menka did not move. Outside, the morning continued as if nothing had happened. The baker called to his son. A cart passed over stone. A bird landed on the courtyard wall, shook dew from its wings and flew away. But inside the small clay cup, the passage remained for another breath, another half-breath, and then disappeared, leaving only ordinary darkness at the bottom of the clay. Menka set the cup down very gently. He had known stories of sacred chambers beneath temples, of hidden rooms where priests kept records no sunlight was meant to read, of wells that touched old water, of passageways built and sealed long before the memory of living men. Yet this was not the same as hearing a tale from a drunken boatman or reading an old line on brittle papyrus. The cup had shown him something. The night had brought him something. And in his life, Menka had learned that when the unseen world placed a thing in one's hands, it was unwise either to worship it too quickly or dismiss it too proudly. He was still standing before the shelf when someone knocked at the gate. The knock was soft but hurried, and when Menka opened the gate, he found Calm standing outside with dust on his sandals and the expression of a man who has come too early to be polite, but too troubled to wait until the hour becomes proper. The scribe looked better than he had the night before. Not healed, not transformed, and not suddenly free of the life that had made him tired, but his eyes were less sharp with sleeplessness, and his hands did not tremble at his sides. "I slept again," Calm said before Menka could greet him, and then, as if remembering himself, he lowered his head. "Forgive me, physician. I should not have come at such an hour." You came when the thought became heavier than waiting, Menka said, stepping aside. That is not always the wrong hour. Calm entered the courtyard, but he did not sit until Menka gestured toward the low stool near the open room. For a few moments, the scribe looked around the house with the wary attention of someone hopping to see whether the room already knew what he had come to say. Menka placed water before him, then sat across from him. "What did you dream?" he asked. Calm's eyes lifted quickly. "How did you know I dreamed?" "Because people who come at dawn after their first true sleep do not come to report the sleep," Menka said. "They come to ask whether the dream that entered with it has the right to remain." Calm touched the cup of water but did not drink. "I dreamed I was inside a passage beneath the northern temple," he said, "though I do not know any such passage, and the stones were cold under my bare feet, and on the walls there were names written so closely together that I thought at first they were lines of grain accounts, until I understood they were not numbers at all." Menka kept his face still. Calm continued. "There was water somewhere nearby, but I could not see it, and a voice said that every name that cannot sleep must be returned to the river." The room grew quiet. Even the sounds of the street seemed to withdraw slightly from the gate. Menka looked toward the shelf where the small clay cup waited between jars of herbs, and he understood that the dream had not belonged to Calm alone. "Did you read any of the names?" he asked. Calm closed his eyes, searching. "I tried, but most of them shifted whenever I looked directly at them, as if they wished to be known and hidden at the same time." "Most?" Menka asked. "One remained still," Calm said. "A child's name, I think, though I cannot be certain, because in the dream I knew it by feeling rather than by letters." Menka waited. Calm opened his eyes. "Merit," he said. The name entered the room like a small lamp being lit. Menka felt the weight of the night before settle again in his chest, not painfully, but with the gravity of a road that had begun beneath his feet without asking whether he had planned to walk it. "Have you spoken with anyone from the House of Blue Columns?" he asked. Calm shook his head. "I know the house, as everyone does, but I have not entered it since the last festival of Opet, and I do not know the lady well." Menka believed him, because the confusion in his face was plain, and because dreams, when they come from the deeper river beneath life, do not always obey the ordinary paths by which people meet. Before either man could speak again, a second knock came at the gate. This one was quicker, smaller, and after it came the sound of a boy trying to control his breath. Menka opened the gate and found Pazer outside, his servant's belt crooked, his hair uncombed, and his eyes wide with the frightened seriousness of someone carrying a message too large for his age. "My lady slept," the boy said at once, as if afraid the words might vanish if he did not release them quickly. "Not long, but she slept, and when she woke she did not call for the musicians or send anyone away, but asked for water and told me to see whether old Uncle Morning had eaten." Calm looked at Menka in confusion, but Menka only nodded. "And had he eaten?" the physician asked. Pazer swallowed. He was swimming around the same place in the pool again and again, near the stone where the moon falls at night, and when I looked there, I saw something under the water. "What did you see?" Menka asked. "A mark," Pazer said. "No, not a mark. A little door shape carved into the floor of the pool, very small, with a line of signs around it, and my lady says it was not there before, but I do not know whether she means truly not there or only not seen." The boy reached into his tunic and pulled out a strip of damp linen. I copied the signs as best I could before the water moved again. He handed the strip to Menka. The ink had blurred, but several shapes remained: a sleeping ibis, a river line, a closed eye, a bowl, and beneath them, 3 strokes that Menka recognized from old funerary inscriptions, though here they were arranged in a way he had never seen. Calm rose from his stool and stepped closer, unable to prevent himself from reading even damp marks on linen. "These are not ordinary house signs," he said. "This one means name or perhaps voice. This one means rest but not death. And this one." He paused. Menka looked at him. "This one what?" Calm's face tightened. "This one appears in older temple records, usually in damaged passages, and the priests disagree over its meaning, but some translate it as returning what has wandered." Pazer looked between the 2 men. "My lady asks whether you will come back." Menka folded the damp linen and placed it beside the clay cup. "I will," he said, "but not before sunset." "Why not?" Pazer asked, and then immediately lowered his eyes, remembering that servants were not always allowed to ask why. Menka answered anyway. "Because whatever has begun belongs to the night, and if we drag it into daylight too quickly, we may only frighten it into silence." Calm sat down again, though now he seemed less like a patient and more like a man unwillingly summoned into a mystery that had found him through sleep. "What is happening?" he asked. Menka looked from the damp linen to the clay cup, then toward the river beyond the wall. "I do not know," he said, "and because I do not know, we must proceed gently." That evening, after the heat of the day had passed, and the first long shadows stretched from the temple columns toward the water, Menka prepared more carefully than he had the night before. He packed no heavy instruments and no bitter medicines, because he did not believe they were walking toward an illness of the ordinary kind. But he took with him the small clay cup, a lamp with fresh oil, a roll of blank papyrus, blue lotus oil, a thread of red linen, a small knife used for cutting reed, and a pouch of sand from the riverbank. Calm returned just before sunset, dressed not as a temple scribe in stiff formal linen, but in a simpler robe, with his writing case tied at his side, and his face marked by a nervous steadiness. "I told the record hall I was ill," he said. "Were you lying?" Menka asked. Calm looked toward the river. "Not entirely." Pazer arrived soon after, sent from the house of blue columns with a small lantern and permission, though Menka suspected the boy would have come even without either. Together, the 3 of them walked along the river road as the evening opened over Egypt. The sky was deepening from gold to violet. The Nile held the last fire of the sun in long trembling lines, and the boats near the bank rocked gently against their ropes, making the same soft wooden-grown calm had remembered from childhood. No one spoke much as they walked. They passed women carrying water jars, children being called home, fishermen folding nets, and priests crossing the temple steps with bowls of incense that sent pale smoke upward into the cooling air. The house of blue columns stood quiet behind its painted gate, though not with the same frozen stillness as before. A lamp burned near the entrance. From within came the faint sound of water being poured into a basin. Pazer led them through the outer rooms, past silent servants and painted walls, to the inner court where Seisha waited beside the pool. She looked tired, and grief still lived plainly in her face, but she was seated upright, with her hands open on her knees, and beside her on the stone lay the papyrus of memories from the night before, weighted at the corners with 4 small pieces of blue glass. Near the pool, a shallow bowl had been placed beside several pairs of sandals, and the faint wet marks on the stone told Menka that Pazer had already washed at least 1 pair before losing courage or becoming too moved to continue. Seisha greeted Menka with a nod, then looked at Calm. "You are the scribe who dreamed my daughter's name," she said, not accusing him, but not protecting him from the truth either. Calm bowed low. "I did not know it was hers until this morning." "Perhaps you still do not know," she said, and her voice was quiet rather than harsh. "Perhaps none of us knows what belongs to whom when the night begins speaking." Menka was relieved to hear this because sorrow had sharpened her, but it had not closed her. He knelt beside the pool. The water was very still, and beneath the reflected sky he could see the small blue fish moving slowly near the far edge, turning and returning, circling a place where the floor of the pool was darker than the rest. Pazer pointed. "There," he whispered. At first Menka saw only stone beneath water. Then the moon rose high enough over the wall that its reflection entered the pool, and the darker place became clear. It was not a door, not truly, but the carving of one. A small rectangle with a rounded top, surrounded by signs so fine that no ordinary house mason would have placed them where water and time could hide them. Calm leaned closer, holding his lamp low. "The signs match the ones from the linen," he said, "but there are more." "Read only what is clear," Menka said. Calm nodded. "This is name, this is sleep, this is river, this is return, this is child perhaps or small one, but it could also mean beginning." He shifted the lamp slightly. "And this phrase?" He hesitated. Seisha's hands tightened on her knees. "What does it say?" Calm swallowed. "The chamber does not open for the dead," he said slowly. "It opens for the living who cannot release them." No one spoke. Even the servants at the edge of the court seemed to stop breathing. Seisha looked at the water for a long time. Then she said, "Where is this chamber?" Calm looked helplessly at Menka. Menka, however, was watching the clay cup. He had placed it on the stone beside the pool when he knelt, and now the moonlight inside it had deepened again. The water in the pool reflected the moon above, while the cup held another moon entirely, smaller and darker. And inside that small dark moon Menka saw again the passageway of stone, but this time it did not seem sealed beneath a temple. It seemed to be beneath water. He reached for the pouch of river sand, opened it, and let a small amount fall into the cup. The moonlight inside trembled. The pool trembled too. Old Uncle Morning, as if disturbed by a current no one else could feel, darted suddenly from one side of the pool to the other. Pazer gasped. The carved door on the pool floor brightened with a pale blue line, not enough to illuminate the court, but enough that everyone present saw it. Then the water became still again. Calm's face had gone pale. Seisha whispered her daughter's name. Menka placed one hand on the stone edge of the pool. "This is not a thing to force," he said, though whether he spoke to the others, to himself, or to whatever waited beneath the sign, he could not have said. Sasha looked at him with eyes that had not slept enough to be safe from hope. "If there is a chamber," she said, "and if Marit's name is there, then I must go." "No," Munka replied gently, "not must." Her face hardened. "Do not tell me what a mother must not do." "I would not dare," Munka said. "I say only that grief often turns every path into a command, and before we step onto this one, we must know whether we are being called by love, by fear, or by a wound that has learned to speak in Marit's voice." The words were difficult, and Sasha received them as difficult words are received by those in pain, first as injury, then as insult, then perhaps as care. She looked away. The moon moved higher. The blue line on the carving faded. Finally, Sasha said, "What do you propose?" Munka turned to Come. "In your dream, did the passage begin with stairs?" "Yes," Come said. "Stairs descending beside a wall carved with lotus flowers." Munka looked to Puzza. "Is there any place in this house where lotus flowers are carved near water?" Puzza thought for a moment, then nodded. "There is an old stair near the back garden, but it goes only to a storage room beneath the house, and no one uses it because the lower walls are damp." Sasha frowned. "I had forgotten that room." Puzza looked at her. "Lady, it was closed before Marit was born." "Then we will begin there," Munka said. They left the inner court with lamps in hand. Sasha came with them, carrying the broken ibis amulet. Come carried his writing case. Puzza led the way through a narrow passage behind the painted rooms, past shelves of unused vessels, rolled mats, old festival decorations, and a row of shuttered windows where dust lay thick enough to remember every hand that had failed to disturb it. At the end of the passage was a small door, lower than the others, its frame painted long ago with blue lotus flowers that had faded almost to gray. Puzza lifted the wooden bar. The door opened with difficulty, breathing out cool, damp air. A stairway descended into darkness. The lamps trembled. Munka stepped first, not because he believed himself braver than the others, but because a physician enters before the frightened when there may be pain ahead. The stairs were narrow and made of stone. Moisture darkened the walls. The lotus carvings continued downward on one side, their petals worn but visible, and beneath them ran a line of old signs, not decorative like those in noble halls, but small, careful, and almost hidden. Come paused to read them. "These are older than the house," he whispered. "How much older?" Sasha asked. Come shook his head. "Older than the paint above us, perhaps older than the family that built over them." The stairs ended in a storage room where broken jars, empty chests, and old reed baskets had been left to sleep beneath the house. At first, there seemed to be nothing more. The room smelled of damp clay, dust, old grain, and stone. Puzza looked disappointed, then ashamed of being disappointed. But Munka moved slowly along the wall, holding the clay cup in one hand and the lamp in the other. The cup remained dim until he reached the far corner. There, behind a stack of cracked water jars, the moonlight inside it deepened. Munka set down the lamp and moved the jars aside one by one. Behind them was a section of wall carved with a sleeping eye, a river line, and an ibis with one wing extended, and one wing folded. Sasha drew in a breath. The broken amulet in her hand grew warm. She opened her palm. A faint blue light touched the crack where the wing had broken. Calm stepped closer and read the inscription beneath the ibis. The river remembers the names that grief cannot carry. Mena closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, he placed the clay cup in a shallow hollow beneath the inscription. The wall made a sound. Not a crack, not a scrape, more like a sigh released after being held for centuries. A seam appeared in the stone. Puzzle took a step back. Sasha did not move. Slowly, very slowly, a hidden door opened inward, revealing a passageway that descended beyond the foundations of the house toward darkness, water, and the cool breath of something older than the street above. Mena lifted the lamp. The flame bent toward the passage, as if drawn by air from far below. No one spoke, because some thresholds make words feel too young. Then Sasha, still holding the broken ibis, whispered, "Murat." The passage did not answer, but from somewhere deep below, water moved. And in that water, faint as a child speaking from another room, a small voice seemed to hum a tune that had no words, yet made Puzzle cover his mouth with both hands and made Sasha close her eyes as if the sound had touched her face. The passage did not answer, but from somewhere deep below, water moved. And in that water, faint as a child speaking from another room, a small voice seemed to hum a tune that had no words, yet made Pazer cover his mouth with both hands and made Sasha close her eyes as if the sound had touched her face. No one moved for several moments. The hidden doorway remained open before them, revealing only darkness and the faint reflection of their lamps against walls that had not seen human footsteps for longer than any of them could imagine. Mena did not step forward immediately. He had learned through many years of listening to people's pain that the greatest danger was not always what waited ahead, but the desire to reach it too quickly, because sometimes the heart runs toward an answer before the mind has understood what question it is asking. He raised the lamp slightly and watched the flame. It leaned gently toward the passage. Not violently, not as if pulled by a storm, only enough to show that the air beyond the doorway was moving. There was a world beneath the world, a place beneath the painted walls, beneath the gardens, beneath the rooms where people ate, slept, argued, laughed, and mourned. A place that had been waiting silently, while generations lived above it without knowing. Sasha stepped closer. Mena saw the expression on her face and understood it immediately. It was not curiosity. It was not excitement. It was the expression of someone standing near a door that might contain the one thing they had wanted most and feared most at the same time. "If we enter," she whispered, "and we find nothing." Her voice stopped. Mena looked at her. "Then we will leave with the truth of having entered." She looked down. "And if we find something?" Mena was silent for a moment. "Then we must be careful," he said, "because not everything we find is meant to be taken." The words were not meant to frighten her. They were meant to protect her. Because Mena had seen many people harmed not by losing something, but by holding too tightly to something they wished could never leave. The four of them entered. The passage was narrow enough that they had to walk carefully, one behind another, with Menka at the front, calm behind him, Seisha carrying the ibis amulet close to her chest, and Pazer holding his small lantern with both hands as though it contained the last remaining piece of daylight. The stone beneath their feet was smooth from time rather than footsteps. The walls were covered with carvings, but these were different from the proud inscriptions found on temple walls, where kings recorded victories and priests recorded rituals. These carvings were smaller, quieter. They showed ordinary things. A woman preparing bread, a father holding a sleeping child, a fisherman returning before sunrise, an old man sitting beside a garden, a young person placing flowers beside a doorway. The scenes were not about greatness. They were about moments. Calm ran his fingers near one carving without touching it. "These are not records of rulers," he whispered. "No," Menka replied. "Then what are they?" Menka looked at the walls. "Reminders." The passage continued downward. The air became cooler. The sound of water grew clearer. Not rushing water, not dangerous water. The gentle movement of a hidden stream. The kind of sound that does not demand attention, but slowly becomes impossible to ignore. After some time, the stairs ended. Before them was a circular chamber. The room was larger than any of them expected, and at its center was a pool of perfectly still water. Around the pool stood hundreds of small stone tablets arranged in circles. Each tablet carried a name. No statues, no treasures, no gold, only names. Calm stepped forward slowly. His eyes moved across the stones. "Thousands," he whispered. Menka approached the nearest tablet. The name carved into it belonged to someone who had clearly not been a king, because there were no titles beside it. Only a name and a single line beneath. She loved the sound of rain on the roof. Menka looked at another. He fixed broken fishing nets beside the western shore. Another. He always gave the first piece of bread to the smallest child. Another. She sang while preparing morning tea. The physician stood quietly. He understood then. This was not a tomb. It was not a place for the dead. It was a place for the forgotten. A chamber built by people who understood that a person does not disappear simply because their voice becomes silent. Calm moved from stone to stone, reading fragments. "These are not histories," he said. "No," Menka answered. "They are pieces." "Yes, pieces of ordinary lives." Menka nodded. "Because ordinary lives are the ones most easily lost." Seisha walked toward the pool. She held the broken ibis in her hand. The water reflected her face, but beneath her reflection another image seemed to appear. A child. A girl sitting beside a window. A small hand holding a stone bird. A voice asking whether the moon became lonely when everyone slept. Seisha fell to her knees. But she did not cry. Not immediately. She only stared. Menka moved closer, but stopped before reaching her. Some moments belong only to the person living them. After a while, Seisha spoke. "She is not calling me." Her voice was quiet. "She is not asking me to follow her." The others remained silent. She is only showing me that she was here. Mena closed his eyes. Because sometimes the greatest healing is not receiving what we lost back. Sometimes it is finally allowing ourselves to understand that what we lost was real, that it mattered, that it existed, that love does not become smaller because the person we loved is no longer standing in front of us. Calm approached another circle of stones. Suddenly he stopped. Mena noticed. "What is it?" The scribe looked pale. "I know this name." He touched the air above the stone. "Not from here." "What do you mean?" Calm swallowed. "This name appears in temple records." Mena stepped closer. The stone was older than the others. The carving was faded, but the name remained. Calm looked at Mena. "It is mine." The chamber became silent. Even the water seemed to stop moving. "My name," Calm whispered. Mena studied the stone. It was not impossible. Names repeat. Families remember. People carry the names of ancestors. But something about Calm's expression told him this was not simply recognition. "What does it say beneath your name?" Calm leaned closer. His voice became almost too quiet to hear. He counted the grains of kings, but forgot to count the days of his own life. The words remained between them. Calm stepped backward. "I have never seen this place." "No," Mena said. "But perhaps this place has seen you." The scribe looked toward the water. For the first time since Mena had met him, Calm did not look afraid. He looked sad, but not the heavy sadness of someone drowning. The lighter sadness of someone finally seeing how long they had been absent from their own life. "I spent years recording everything," he said. "Every shipment, every number, every amount, every name of every person who carried something into the temple." His voice trembled. "But I never wrote my own." Mena placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Perhaps because you believed your own life was not something worth recording." Calm looked away. The silence answered for him. Near the center of the chamber, the pool began to move. Not because anyone touched it. Not because anything fell into it. The water simply changed. A small circle formed. Then another. Then another. Until the surface reflected not the chamber above it, but a sky full of stars. Pazer stepped closer. "Is that the same sky?" Mena looked down. "No." The boy looked confused. "Then what is it?" Mena watched the stars move across the water. A remembered sky. The reflection shifted. The chamber changed. Not physically, not truly, but enough that they felt as though another time had briefly placed itself beside their own. They saw people entering this room centuries earlier. Parents, children, travelers, physicians, teachers, people carrying objects that meant something to them. A wooden toy, a piece of cloth, a broken cup, a flower, a letter. They placed these things beside names, not as offerings, as reminders, because they believed that a person was not only their achievements, not only their wealth, not only the things written about them. A person was also the small moments that disappeared unless someone cared enough to remember. Seisha touched the stone beside her. My daughter loved sandals being washed. Her voice was almost a whisper. And someone wrote that down. Mena nodded. Yes. Someone thought that was important. Yes. The tears finally came. But they were different from the tears of the previous night. Those tears had been sharp. They had carried fear. They had carried refusal. These tears were quieter. They were the tears of someone opening a window in a room that had been closed too long. Pazer wiped his eyes. Calm looked around the chamber. And Mena stood beside the water, holding the clay cup, wondering why the river had brought them all here. Then he noticed something. At the far side of the chamber was another door. Unlike the others, it had no names around it. No carvings. No decorations. Only one symbol. A sleeping eye. And beneath it a single sentence. The names of others may help you remember, but your own name will show you the way. Mena felt the weight of the words before he understood them, because he knew then that this chamber was not only about the forgotten. It was about the living who had forgotten themselves. And somewhere beyond that final door waited the part of the journey that none of them had expected. Not a treasure, not a secret, not an answer. Something much more difficult. A memory they had buried inside themselves. For a long while, no one approached the final door. The chamber of names remained around them, quiet and circular, with its still pool at the center and its countless stones arranged like a field of sleeping stars, while the lamps they carried made the carved letters glow and fade with every small movement of flame. Mena stood nearest to the door, but even he did not touch it, because the sentence beneath the sleeping eye had entered him more deeply than he wished to admit. The names of others may help you remember, but your own name will show you the way. He had spent his life listening to the names of others. He had learned the names of patients, of parents, of children, of herbs, of wounds, of fevers, of fears people spoke aloud and fears they carried in silence. He had known the names of griefs that arrived dressed as sleeplessness, the names of loneliness hidden beneath anger, the names of memories buried so deeply in the body that they returned only as pain in the hands, tightness in the chest, or a child's unwillingness to close their eyes. Yet standing before that door, Mena realized that his own name, the one people spoke with trust, gratitude, urgency, or relief, had become less like a person and more like a role he entered each morning. Physician, healer, listener, quiet hands, the man beside the river. All of these names belonged to him, and yet none of them were the first name he had carried. None of them were the names spoken over him when he was a child waking before dawn. None of them were the name he had heard in his mother's voice. None of them were the name that had once belonged not to service, not to wisdom, not to duty, but to a boy standing barefoot at the edge of the Nile, afraid of something he could not explain. Calm read the sentence again, his lips moving silently, and perhaps because he was a scribe, or perhaps because the chamber had already begun working on him, he understood that the words were not a decoration. They are asking something of us, he said. Seisha looked toward the final door, then down at the broken ibis resting in her palm. "Of all of us." Menka did not answer immediately. The water in the center pool moved once, only slightly, and the reflected stars trembled as if a breath had passed beneath them. "I think," he said at last, "that this place does not open because we are ready, but because we have stopped pretending that readiness is the same as certainty." Pazer, who had stayed close to Seisha since entering the chamber, looked at the door with wide eyes. "If it opens by a name," he asked, "whose name must be spoken?" No one answered. The question moved around them in the cool air. Then the chamber itself seemed to respond, though not with a voice. A faint sound rose from the stones. At first it was like water passing over pebbles, then like whispering, then like many people breathing softly in their sleep. The names carved into the tablets began to glow, not brightly and not all at once, but one after another, until the room held a dim and gentle light, as though each remembered life had lifted a lamp no larger than a firefly. Calm stepped back, overcome. Seisha pressed the ibis to her chest. Pazer reached for the edge of her sleeve without thinking, and she allowed him to hold it. The glow moved outward through the circles of stones, and as it reached the final door, the sleeping eye above the inscription opened. Not physically. The carved stone did not move. Yet somehow the eye was no longer closed. Menka felt it looking not at his face, not at his hands, not at his lamp or his medicine bag, but at the place inside him where he had hidden from himself for so long that the hiding had become part of his peace. Then from the pool at the center of the chamber, a voice came. It was not the voice from the clay cup. It was lower, nearer, older. It did not sound like a god, because gods in the stories people told were often too large for tenderness. This voice sounded like water moving through a dark place, patient enough to shape stone and gentle enough to carry a leaf. "Speak the name you have not used for yourself." The words passed through the chamber and faded into the walls. Calm looked at Menka. Seisha looked at Menka. Pazer looked at Menka. And Menka, who had guided them through fear, grief, and mystery, with the calm patience of a man accustomed to holding other people steady, felt suddenly unable to move. "I do not know what it means," he said. But even as he spoke, he knew this was not true. He knew exactly what it meant. He had simply not opened that part of memory for many years. Perhaps because no one had asked. Perhaps because everyone needed him to be Menka the physician, and he had allowed that need to protect him from being anyone else. Pazer, still holding Seisha's sleeve, spoke carefully. "Is Menka not your name?" "It is," Menka said. "And not?" The boy's question was plain, and because it was plain, it reached him. Menka looked down at his hands. They were old hands now, though not weak. Hands that had washed wounds, held fevered wrists, mixed herbs, closed the eyes of the dying, opened the fists of frightened children, written instructions for sleep, and touched the shoulders of men who did not know how to ask for comfort. But before they had been healing hands, they had been a child's hands. Small, restless, often wet with river water, often stained with clay, often gripping the edge of a reed boat because he feared falling into the dark current. "My mother," he said slowly, "called me men." The name sounded strange in the chamber, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it had waited so long that it arrived carrying dust. "Only men?" Calm asked softly. Menka nodded. "When I was a boy." The door did not open. The water did not move. The chamber waited. Menka understood that the name alone was not enough. It did not want sound. It wanted truth. He closed his eyes. And because the chamber of sleeping names was deep beneath stone, beneath water, beneath a house built over older walls, and because all those remembered lives around him seemed to be keeping a quiet watch, Menka let himself return to the place he had not entered in years. He saw himself as a child on the riverbank at dusk, smaller than Pazer, with bare feet covered in mud and a string tied around his wrist, because his mother believed it helped him remember not to wander too far. He saw the old house where he had been born, not the house he lived in now, but another one farther south, where the river widened and the reeds grew taller than a man. He saw his mother kneeling beside a clay oven, her hair wrapped in blue cloth, singing under her breath while smoke lifted through the courtyard. He saw his father shaping clay cups in the shade, turning the wheel with one foot, making ordinary vessels for ordinary hands. And he saw the night the river rose too quickly. The memory came not as a story at first, but as fragments. Rain in a season when rain should not have mattered. Men shouting in the dark. A goat crying from a flooded pen. His mother's hands tying cloth around a bundle. His father lifting jars onto shelves that would not be high enough. Water entering the courtyard like an animal that had been waiting outside the gate. He had not thought of that night in many years. Not because he had forgotten it, because he had built his life so carefully around its absence that it no longer seemed necessary to look directly at the place where it had begun. "I was 8, Menka said, though his voice no longer sounded fully like the physician's voice. The flood came at night, after days of strange weather upstream, and by the time the warning reached our village, the water had already entered the lower houses." Seisha listened with the stillness of a woman who had come expecting to find her own lost child and had unexpectedly found the child inside another person. "Father told my mother to take me to the upper road," Menka continued, "but she went first to help the woman next door, because the woman had given birth only 3 days before and could not walk quickly." The chamber remained silent. The names glowed softly. My mother carried the newborn while the woman leaned on her shoulder, and I remember being angry, not because I did not understand kindness, but because I wanted her hands for myself. He paused. The words hurt more than he expected. Children are often ashamed, many years later, of the selfishness that was simply fear with a smaller body. "The water rose around us as we reached the road," he said, "and in the confusion I slipped." Pazer's fingers tightened on Seisha's sleeve. Menka looked toward the pool. "I fell into the floodwater, and for a moment there was no sky, no road, no mother, only brown water and the sound of everything striking everything else." His breath changed. He noticed it, then allowed it. The old fear moved through him, not as strongly as it had once lived, but enough that his body remembered before his mind could command calm. "I thought the river had taken me," he said. "Then someone caught my wrist." His eyes opened. "My father." The pool reflected the lamps. He had followed behind us with nothing in his hands, though I learned later that he had left behind his tools, his finished cups, his wheel, and the jars he had spent weeks preparing for market. Menka looked down at the clay cup he had carried from his house. Perhaps it had not come from nowhere. Perhaps nothing comes from nowhere. He caught me by the wrist and held me against a beam that had broken loose from someone's roof, and he kept saying my childhood name, again and again, not as a command, not in anger, but to keep me inside my own body. Men, men, men. The chamber seemed to repeat it without sound. The syllable moved softly among the stones. My mother reached the upper road with the woman and the baby, Menka said. I saw her there. I saw her calling to us. I saw the blue cloth around her hair. He stopped. Calm lowered his head. Seisha closed her eyes. They knew before he said it. The beam struck another wall, Menka said, and my father lifted me toward a man standing above us, a fisherman, I think, though I never learned his name. He pushed me upward with both hands. Menka's own hands moved slightly, as if remembering the force. Then the water turned him away. There was no need to say more quickly. The chamber allowed grief to unfold at its own pace. I was saved, Menka said after a long while. My father was not. The pool at the center of the chamber darkened. Not with danger, with depth. For years afterward, I hated the river, Menka said. I hated its sound, its smell, its calm mornings, its beauty when people praised it. I hated that it carried boats and flowers and moonlight after carrying him away. No one interrupted him. But my mother, who had lost her husband to the same water that had returned me to her, would not let me turn the river into an enemy. She told me that what carries and what takes are sometimes the same thing, and that the heart becomes hard when it insists the world must be only one kind of truth. Menka smiled faintly, though his eyes were wet. I did not understand her. I was a child. I wanted the river to be guilty. Pazer looked at the clay cup. Was your father the potter? Menka nodded. He made cups like this. Yes. Then maybe. The boy stopped, afraid he had gone too far. Menka looked at him gently. Say it. Maybe the cup is not from the chamber, Pazer said. Maybe it is from him. Menka touched the rim of the clay cup. The uneven edge fitted beneath his thumb, as though it had always known the shape of his hand. I do not know, he said. And this time, the not knowing did not trouble him. The voice from the pool returned. Speak the name as it was held when you were afraid. Menka closed his eyes again. He heard floodwater. He heard his father. Not the full name given to the man who became a physician. Not the name spoken by patients, scribes, mothers, priests, and servants. Only the small name thrown across dark water like a rope. Men, he whispered. The chamber changed. The final door opened. No stone moved at first, but the darkness beyond it softened, and a narrow line of blue light appeared around the frame. Then, with the slow patience of something that had waited longer than any one life, the door opened inward. Beyond it was not another passage. It was a river. Not the Nile as seen under moonlight, with boats and reeds and temple lamps along its banks. This river flowed beneath the world. Its water was dark blue, almost black, and yet it gave off light from within, as if stars had dissolved into it and continued shining beneath the surface. A narrow stone walkway led along its edge. On the far side, half hidden in mist, stood shapes that might have been columns or trees or people waiting with their hands folded. The air smelled of wet stone, lotus and clay after rain. Seisha stepped forward, but Menka raised one hand. Slowly, they entered the final chamber. Here, the sound of water was everywhere. Not loud, not overwhelming. It moved around them with the steady rhythm of breath, and as they walked along the stone path, the river beneath the earth reflected images that did not belong to the present moment. Kam saw himself as a boy sleeping near the docks while ropes creaked against posts. Pazer saw Merit laughing beside the pool, pointing at the blue fish and insisting that names should be asked politely. Seisha saw her daughter not in fever, not in death, but standing on a low step in sunlight, trying to balance the ibis amulet on her head like a crown and failing every time. The woman covered her mouth. This time the tears came with a smile, and though the smile broke, it had existed. Menka saw his father at the wheel, hands wet with clay, shaping a cup. The man was younger than Menka had allowed himself to remember. Not a symbol, not a sacrifice, not only the figure lost in floodwater. A man, a potter, someone who laughed when a cup collapsed on the wheel and began again without anger. The underground river moved beside them. The voice did not speak now. It did not need to. At the end of the walkway stood a low stone table. On it lay no treasure, no scroll of forbidden knowledge, no royal secret. Only a shallow basin filled with clear water and a reed pen resting beside it. Behind the table, carved into the wall, were words. Kam read them aloud. What is remembered with love may rest. What is gripped with fear must wander. Write not the name of the dead to bind them. Write the truth of love so the living may sleep. Seisha's face trembled. What does that mean? Menka looked at the basin. I think it means this chamber was not made to call the dead back, he said. It was made to help the living stop trapping them inside pain. The words were difficult, but the place held them gently. Kam opened his writing case, but Menka shook his head. Not as a scribe, he said. Kam understood. He closed the case. The reed pen on the stone table was old, yet when Seisha lifted it, its tip was soft with water as though it had just been cut. The basin waited. She looked at Menka. What do I write? He answered quietly. Not what she was when she died. Seisha closed her eyes. Then what? What made her alive? The chamber listened. Seisha dipped the pen into the basin. The water darkened into ink. On the stone surface before her, where there had been no papyrus, a pale sheet appeared like moonlight becoming paper. Her hand shook. Pazer stepped closer but did not touch her. Kam bowed his head. Menka stood beside her, not guiding the pen, only remaining near. Seisha began to write. Merit asked the moon if it was lonely. She believed sandals made little rivers when washed at evening. She told Pazer not to become a shadow. She named the blue fish Old Uncle Morning. She held the ibis against her cheek when sleep came close. He wants to learn the names of things before they are taken away. He wants someone to hear him when he speaks. When the words lifted, Pazer stared at them as if he had not expected his own truth to have light. The river received them. Seisha reached for his hand. He hesitated only a moment before taking it. Menka looked at the basin. He knew before it turned toward him. He knew before the water darkened. He knew before the reed pen rolled across the stone table and came to rest near his hand. The chamber had not brought him here only to help the others. He had wanted to believe that. It would have been easier. But the river does not carry only what one chooses to place upon it. Sometimes it brings back what has waited beneath the surface. He lifted the pen. For a moment, no sheet appeared. Then the clay cup beside him filled with light. The basin answered. A pale page formed before him. His hand, which had been steady through wounds, fevers, grief, and fear, trembled. He wrote the first word, Men. Then he stopped. It was strange how small the name looked. A whole childhood held in 3 letters. A whole grief folded into 1 syllable. He continued. Men was a boy who feared the river after the flood. His father made clay cups and laughed when they collapsed. His mother sang beside the oven and would not let hatred become the only memory of water. His father held his wrist in the dark and called his name until the world returned. Men became Menka because healing others was easier than asking who held him. He has carried many sorrows carefully. He has not always carried his own. The words blurred. He realized tears had gathered in his eyes. He did not wipe them away. The final line waited. Menka breathed in. The river breathed with him. He wrote, The river took my father, but it did not take his hands from mine. The sentence rose from the page. It shone brighter than he expected. Not with glory, with release. It drifted above the basin, then moved toward the underground river. For one unbearable moment, Menka wanted to reach for it. He wanted to hold it back. He wanted to keep his father inside the safety of pain, because pain at least had stayed. But then he remembered his mother's words. What carries and what takes are sometimes the same thing. He let the sentence go. The river received it. The water darkened. Then, on the far side of the underground river, beside the place where Merit had appeared and vanished, a man sat at a potter's wheel. Menka could not see his face clearly. Only the shape of his shoulders, the movement of his hands, wet clay turning, a cup rising from the wheel. The man did not look up. He did not need to. Menka knew him. The potter shaped the cup, lifted it gently, and set it on a board beside him among many others. Then he placed one hand on the nearest cup, as if blessing an ordinary thing. The image faded. Menka stood very still. The underground river moved on. And for the first time in many years, the sound of water did not enter him as a debt. It entered him as a voice that had carried both loss and life, both absence and return, both the child he had been and the physician he had become. The basin cleared. The reed pen dried. The sleeping eye on the wall closed. They understood, without being told, that the chamber had given what it would give that night. Seisha rose slowly, holding the broken ibis. Its wing was still broken, but the oil Menka had placed upon it had dried into a thin blue line, and in that line there was a small shine like the edge of morning. Calm gathered nothing. Pazer still held Seisha's hand. Menka lifted the clay cup from the table. It was empty now. Not hollow. Empty in the clean way. A vessel becomes empty after fulfilling its purpose. They walked back along the stone path beside the underground river. No one spoke, because words would have been too small and also unnecessary. She was loved beyond the measure of days. The final line took the longest. Seisha wrote it slowly, and when she finished, the words lifted from the page like breath rising in cold air. They did not vanish. They drifted toward the underground river. For a moment they floated above the water, each sentence shining faintly. Then the river received them. Seisha made a sound as if something had torn inside her, but she did not reach after the words. She watched them go, and as they entered the dark blue water, a small shape appeared on the far side of the river. A child. Not clearly, not fully, not enough to mistake for return. Only the suggestion of a girl standing in soft light, holding a stone bird with two whole wings. Seisha could not speak. The child lifted one hand. Not goodbye, not stay, only a gesture light enough to be both. Then she turned and walked into the mist beyond the far shore, where no living feet could follow. Seisha fell to her knees. Pazer began to weep. Calm turned away, not to hide from sorrow but to give it space. Menka stood still, and the underground river moved beside them, carrying what had been written. After a long time, Seisha whispered, she was not alone. Menka knelt beside her. No, and I do not have to keep her awake. No. The woman pressed both hands to her face. When she lowered them, she looked older, but also less trapped inside the moment of loss. The chamber had not taken grief from her. Nothing true could do that. But it had given grief a river. It had given love a way to move. Then the basin turned toward calm. Not physically. It remained where it was. Yet all of them felt the invitation shift. Calm looked at the pen as though it were more dangerous than any blade. I am not dead, he said. No, Menka replied. Then why does it ask me? Menka placed the clay cup on the stone table. Perhaps because you have been living as if parts of you were. Calm did not answer. He looked toward the river, where faint images of sleeping docks moved beneath the surface. At last he lifted the pen. The sheet before him appeared slowly. He did not write a title. He did not write his rank. He did not write the temple's name. He wrote. Calm heard ropes creak against posts when he was a boy. He loved the smell of wet wood before dawn. He once wanted to draw boats instead of counting grain. He has forgotten many mornings, but not all of them are lost. He may begin again with one evening beside water. When the words rose, they were dimmer than Seisha, not because they mattered less, but because they belonged to a living man who was still learning how to believe them. The river received them gently. Calm covered his eyes with one hand. I thought I came because I could not sleep, he said. Menka stood beside him. Perhaps sleep was only the messenger. Calm laughed once, softly and without humor, yet the sound was not bitter. Then the basin turned toward Pazer. The boy stepped back. "No," he said quickly. Seisha looked at him. "You do not have to." But the river moved. Pazer looked smaller than he had before, perhaps because children often carry burdens adults do not see until a sacred room asks them to set one down. "I do not know what to write," he said. Mena lowered himself so his eyes were level with the boy. "Write what is true." Pazer swallowed. "I am a servant. That is not all that is true. I am poor. That is not all that is true. I am afraid," Pazer whispered. Mena nodded. "That is a beginning." The boy took the pen with both hands. The sheet appeared. His letters were uneven. Calm, seeing this, almost stepped forward to help, then stopped himself, because not every crooked line needs correction. Pazer wrote slowly. Pazer walks quietly because he was taught not to disturb important people. Merritt said he would become a shadow if he forgot to make sound. He does not want to be a shadow. He wants to learn the names of things before they are taken away. He wants someone to hear him when he speaks. When the words lifted, Pazer stared at them as if he had not expected his own truth to have light. The river received them. Seisha reached for his hand. He hesitated only a moment before taking it. Mena looked at the basin. He knew before it turned toward him. He knew before the water darkened. He knew before the reed pen rolled across the stone table and came to rest near his hand. The chamber had not brought him here only to help the others. He had wanted to believe that. It would have been easier. But the river does not carry only what one chooses to place upon it. Sometimes it brings back what has waited beneath the surface. He lifted the pen. For a moment, no sheet appeared. Then the clay cup beside him filled with light. The basin answered. A pale page formed before him. His hand, which had been steady through wounds, fevers, grief, and fear, trembled. He wrote the first word. Men. Then he stopped. It was strange how small the name looked. A whole childhood held in 3 letters. A whole grief folded into 1 syllable. He continued. Men was a boy who feared the river after the flood. His father made clay cups and laughed when they collapsed. His mother sang beside the oven and would not let hatred become the only memory of water. His father held his wrist in the dark and called his name until the world returned. Men became Mena because healing others was easier than asking who held him. He has carried many sorrows carefully. He has not always carried his own. The words blurred. He realized tears had gathered in his eyes. He did not wipe them away. The final line waited. Mena breathed in. The river breathed with him. He wrote, "The river took my father, but it did not take his hands from mine." The sentence rose from the page. It shone brighter than he expected. Not with glory, with release. It drifted above the basin, then moved toward the underground river. For one unbearable moment, Mena wanted to reach for it. He wanted to hold it back. He wanted to keep his father inside the safety of pain, because pain at least had stayed. But then he remembered his mother's words. What carries and what takes are sometimes the same thing. He let the sentence go. The river received it. The water darkened. Then, on the far side of the underground river, beside the place where Merit had appeared and vanished, a man sat at a potter's wheel. Menka could not see his face clearly, only the shape of his shoulders, the movement of his hands, wet clay turning, a cup rising from the wheel. The man did not look up. He did not need to. Menka knew him. The potter shaped the cup, lifted it gently, and set it on a board beside him among many others. Then he placed one hand on the nearest cup, as if blessing an ordinary thing. The image faded. Menka stood very still. The underground river moved on. And for the first time in many years, the sound of water did not enter him as a debt. It entered him as a voice that had carried both loss and life, both absence and return, both the child he had been and the physician he had become. The basin cleared. The reed pen dried. The sleeping eye on the wall closed. They understood, without being told, that the chamber had given what it would give that night. Seisha rose slowly, holding the broken ibis. Its wing was still broken, but the oil Menka had placed upon it had dried into a thin blue line, and in that line there was a small shine like the edge of morning. Calm gathered nothing. Pazer still held Seisha's hand. Menka lifted the clay cup from the table. It was empty now. Not hollow. Empty in the clean way. A vessel becomes empty after fulfilling its purpose. They walked back along the stone path beside the underground river. No one spoke, because words would have been too small and also unnecessary. Behind them, the river continued to move in darkness, carrying names, memories, love, grief, childhood, apology, and the truths people could not sleep until they had given away. When they passed through the final door, it closed behind them without sound. The chamber of names was still there, circular and quiet, its pool reflecting the lamps, its stones no longer glowing but not dark either. Calm paused beside the tablet that carried his name. The line beneath it had changed. It no longer said that he had forgotten to count the days of his own life. Now it said, he heard the ropes again. Calm touched his forehead and bowed. Seisha searched the stones until she found the one that had not been there before. Merit. Beneath the name were the words she had written, smaller now, carved as if they had always belonged there. She was loved beyond the measure of days. Seisha placed the broken ibis on the stone. Then, after a moment, she picked it up again. Menka watched this with quiet approval. Some things are not meant to be left behind. Some things are meant to return with us, no longer as chains, but as companions. Pazer looked for his own stone, but found none. He seemed almost disappointed. Menka placed a hand on his shoulder. Yours is not here because you are not lost to yourself, he said. The boy looked up. Not yet. Not if you keep making sound. Pazer smiled only a little. But it was enough. They climbed back through the hidden passage beneath the house of blue columns, past the inscription of the ibis, through the damp storage room, up the lotus-carved stairs, and into the painted rooms above. The house felt different when they returned. Not joyful. Not healed in the simple way people sometimes wish houses could be healed, but less afraid of its own silence. The servants who had waited in the corridors looked at Seisha, and she looked back at them as if seeing not shadows moving around her grief, but people who had been living beside it. In the inner court, old Uncle Morning circled once near the surface of the pool and disappeared beneath a lotus leaf. The moon had crossed half the sky. The papyrus of memories still lay beside the water. Seisha placed the ibis on it, then looked at Pazer. "Tomorrow evening," she said, "we will wash the sandals by the pool." Pazer nodded. "And you will tell me," she added, "what sound they make." The boy's face changed, quietly and completely. "Yes, my lady." Kam asked permission to return to his home before dawn, and Seisha granted it, though before leaving he knelt beside the pool and listened to the water for a while, as if trying to learn a language he had once known as a child. Menka walked back with him along the river road. They did not speak until they reached the place where the path divided, one way toward the temple records, the other toward the scribe's house. "I do not think I can return to the same life," Kam said. Menka looked at the river. "No one returns from a true chamber by the same door through which they entered." Kam breathed in. "I cannot leave my duties." "Perhaps not. I cannot become a boy beside the docks again." "No. Then what can I do?" Menka smiled gently. "You can hear the ropes." Kam closed his eyes. The boats along the bank moved softly in the current. Their ropes creaked against wooden posts. For the first time, Kam listened without counting them. Then he bowed to Menka and walked toward his house slowly, with the uncertain steps of a man who had not been freed from life, but had been returned to it with one forgotten sense restored. Menka continued alone toward his own gate. The sky in the east had not yet lightened, but the deepest part of night had passed. When he entered his courtyard, the air smelled of river damp, extinguished lamps, herbs, and the faint sweetness of lotus. He placed the clay cup back on the shelf. It was only a cup now. Old, chipped, ordinary. And because it was ordinary, it seemed more precious than before. He sat in the open room facing the river, too wakeful to sleep and too peaceful to think. For a long time, he listened to the Nile. Not as an enemy, not as a cure, not as a god, as water, moving, carrying, returning nothing in the form one demands, yet returning in time the truths that can be born. Just before dawn, Menka rested his hands on his knees and whispered the childhood name once more. Men. This time it did not hurt. Or rather, it hurt as a healed place hurts when rain changes the air, reminding the body not only of the wound, but of the fact that it closed. Outside, the first bird called from the reeds. The city slept for one more breath. And the river, dark and patient beneath the fading stars, carried the night gently toward morning. Morning came slowly to the house beside the Nile, not as a sudden arrival of light, but as a gradual loosening of darkness from the edges of the world, while the river changed from black to blue, from blue to silver, and from silver to the warm pale gold that touched the rooftops, the temple stones, the folded sails, and the tired hands of those who had remained awake long enough to see night become memory. Mena had not slept after returning from the hidden chamber beneath the house of blue columns, yet he did not feel the sharp exhaustion that usually follows a night without rest, because there are certain kinds of wakefulness that do not empty a person in the same way as worry, and this wakefulness had been filled with water, names, old grief, and the strange quiet that comes when something long held inside the body has finally been allowed to move. He remained in the open room facing the river until the city began to stir around him, and although his eyes were heavy, his heart felt less crowded, as if the chamber beneath the earth had not only received the written truths of Seisha, Calm, Pazer, and himself, but had also widened the space in which those truths could live. On the shelf behind him, the clay cup sat between the jars of blue lotus and honey, ordinary now in every visible way, with no moonlight inside it, no hidden passage appearing in its dark curve, no voice rising from its hollow, and yet Mena could not look at it without feeling that his father's hands had returned to the room in a gentler form. He did not know whether the cup had truly belonged to his father, whether it had been carried by the river through time, whether the chamber had created it from memory, or whether some person unknown to him had placed it on the threshold for reasons of their own. And for once, he found that he did not need to choose among these possibilities. Some things become smaller when explained too quickly. Some things must be allowed to remain wide. The first patient of the day arrived before the sun had fully cleared the eastern houses. A young mother carrying a child with red cheeks and a cough that sounded worse than it was. And Mena treated the boy with warm honey water, crushed mint, and a story about a lazy crocodile who had once pretended to be a log for so many years that even the birds began nesting on his back. The child listened with grave attention, as children do when a story is offered not as entertainment but as a bridge away from discomfort. And by the time Mena finished wrapping a warm cloth around his chest, the boy had stopped crying and was asking whether the crocodile minded the birds. Mena told him that the crocodile had minded very much at first, but later discovered that being mistaken for a peaceful place was not the worst fate in the world. The mother laughed softly, and the sound, ordinary and human, filled the courtyard with the kind of morning life that made the night's mysteries feel less like a dream and more like a root hidden beneath the soil of the day. Other patients came and went. A merchant with stomach pains, caused more by fear of losing money than by anything he had eaten. A temple worker with a burned thumb. An old man whose hearing had faded but who still came every few weeks because, as he said, he liked to sit where people did not shout at him. A girl with a rash on her arm who wanted to know if it meant she was turning into a fish, which Mena assured her was unlikely, though he admitted that the river had always been fond of surprises. All morning he worked with the same care as always, but something in him had shifted, and he noticed it most clearly not in what he did, but in what he no longer did. He no longer hurried to become useful before feeling his own breath. He no longer pushed aside every memory that did not belong to the person in front of him. He no longer treated his own sorrow as an uninvited guest that must be hidden before others arrived, Instead, while his hands washed, mixed, wrapped, lifted, and steadied, a quieter part of him sat near the underground river, watching his written sentence enter the dark blue water. The river took my father, but it did not take his hands from mine. By midday, when the heat rose and the street outside became white with glare, Menka closed the outer gate for a short rest, not because there were no more pains in the city, but because he remembered with a kind of amused humility that even physicians belong to bodies. He ate bread dipped in oil, a few dates, and a small bowl of lentils, then lay down on the mat in the shaded room where the linen curtains moved with the river breeze. For a while he did not sleep. He watched the curtain rise and fall. He listened to the far sound of boats, cellars, animals, and footsteps. He thought of Seisha in the house of blue columns, perhaps waking beside the pool after a night in which her daughter had not returned, and yet had been released into memory differently. He thought of Kam, who might be standing in the record hall trying to count grain while hearing ropes creak softly beneath every number. He thought of Pazer, who had written that he did not want to become a shadow, and he hoped the boy would remember the sound of his own steps when moving through rooms where servants were expected to vanish. At last Menka slept. His dream was not long, or if it was long, it passed through him like water through reeds, leaving only a few images when he woke. He dreamed of his father's wheel turning beneath a palm shade. He dreamed of rows of cups drying in sunlight. He dreamed that each cup held a different sky. In one dawn, in one storm, in one stars, in one the reflection of a boy's face looking down and discovering that he was no longer afraid of what looked back. When he woke, the afternoon had softened. The cup on the shelf remained still. The house was quiet, and on the floor near the threshold of the open room lay a small folded piece of papyrus that had not been there before he slept. Menka sat up slowly. The papyrus was sealed with a thin line of blue wax. There was no name on the outside. He opened it carefully. The writing was Seisha, though less steady than the writing of a trained scribe and more deliberate than a message composed in haste. Physician, she had written, I slept until morning, and when I woke, I remembered her laughter before I remembered her fever, which frightened me because I thought perhaps this meant I was losing her again. But then Pazer brought water and washed the sandals by the pool, and the sound was so exactly what she loved that I understood memory does not always arrive dressed in pain. Below that, in smaller letters, she had added, the ibis remains broken, but I have asked for gold to mend the wing, not to hide the break, but to honor it. Menka read the note twice. Then he folded it and placed it beside the clay cup. The second message arrived near evening, carried by a temple boy from the record hall. It was from Kam. The note was shorter, written in the disciplined hand of a man accustomed to columns and official accounts, but there was a space between the lines that had not been there before. I heard the ropes this morning, it said. I made an error in the grain record and corrected it without shame. At sunset, I will take my son to the docks and ask him what sound the boats make. Menka smiled. That note he placed beside Seisha. The third message did not arrive as writing. It arrived as sound. Just as the evening lamps began to appear along the river, and Menka was preparing to grind herbs for a woman expected after moonrise, he heard footsteps outside the gate. Not hurried, Not hidden, not silent. Small footsteps, but deliberate ones. Pazer stood in the lane when Menka opened the gate, holding a little basket in both hands. "I was sent with dates from my lady," the boy said, then, after a pause, added, "but I walked loudly." Menka looked down at the boy's dusty feet. "So I heard." Pazer tried not to smile and failed. Inside the basket were dates, a small linen cloth, and a blue bead shaped like a fish. "My lady said to give you the dates," Pazer said. "And old Uncle Morning gave nothing because he is a fish and owns nothing, but I thought this looked like him." Menka accepted the bead with great seriousness. "I will keep it where no one forgets his name." Pazer nodded, satisfied. Then his expression changed. Did the chamber close forever? Menka looked toward the river, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the deepening blue. "I do not know. Will we need it again?" "Yes," Menka said after a thoughtful silence, "but perhaps not by going there." The boy frowned. How can a person need a place without going to it? Menka held up the blue fish bead. By remembering what it taught. Pazer considered this carefully, as if deciding whether the answer was useful enough to carry back through the streets. Then he nodded once. "My lady cried today," he said, "but she also asked for figs." "That is good. Because figs are good. Because wanting figs means some part of her has returned to the world of taste." Pazer looked impressed by this, perhaps because he had never before considered fruit as evidence of the soul's return. When he left, he walked loudly enough that Menka could hear him until the lane turned. The physician closed the gate and leaned his forehead against the wood for a moment, not from sorrow, but from gratitude so quiet that it almost felt like sadness. The day had given back more than he expected. And yet, as the evening deepened and the first patient of the night arrived, Menka sensed that the chamber beneath the river had not finished its work. Not because the wall would open again. Not because the cup would fill again with moonlight. But because once a hidden room has been found, the world above it begins to show its own hidden rooms more clearly. The woman who came after moonrise was a weaver named Tyrant, whose fingers had begun to stiffen in the mornings. And while Menka warmed her hands in a bowl of water scented with cedar, she spoke of her loom, her daughters, and the thread she had been saving for a cloth she never began because it had belonged to her mother. An old fisherman came later with a cut along his forearm, and after Menka cleaned it, the man confessed that he still set aside the best piece of fish for his wife, though she had been dead for 6 years, and that he did not know whether this was love, foolishness, or habit. Near midnight, a young priest arrived with no visible injury, sat in the courtyard, and said that he had forgotten the sound of his own voice when not chanting words written by others. Menka listened. He did not tell them of the chamber. He did not speak of the underground river. He did not turn every grief into a mystery. Instead, he used what he had learned. He asked Tyrant what her mother's thread had been meant to become. He asked the fisherman whether he ate the fish after setting it aside, and when the man said no, Menka suggested that perhaps love would not be insulted if hunger were allowed to sit at the same table. He asked the young priest to speak one sentence that had never been carved on a temple wall, and the priest sat for a long time before whispering that he missed being called by his sister when the evening meal was ready. Each answer, small as it seemed, entered the night like a name returned to water. And Menka understood then that the chamber had never been only a place beneath stone. It had been a way of listening. It had been a way of asking what love had become trapped inside pain, what memory had been mistaken for duty, what part of the living had stopped moving because the dead, the absent, the childhood self, or the abandoned dream had not yet been given a river. The days that followed were ordinary, which is to say they were full of secret things. Seisha sent no more long messages, but Pazer came often, sometimes with dates, sometimes with figs, sometimes with no reason at all except to report that the sandals had sounded like little rivers, that old Uncle Morning had hidden beneath the lotus leaf for most of the afternoon, or that his lady had begun sitting near the pool before sunset without holding the ibis so tightly. Calm came once every 7 evenings, not as a patient, though he always drank the tea Menka placed before him, and he spoke of the record hall, his son, the docks, and the strange difficulty of returning to a life that had not changed while the person living it had. He had begun drawing boats in the margins of discarded papyrus. At first they were stiff and careful. Then slowly they began to move. One evening he brought a drawing for Menka. It showed 3 boats tied along the riverbank, their ropes curved gently in the current, and beneath them Calm had written, "They remain because the knots allow movement." Menka kept it on the wall near the shelf, where the clay cup sat. The cup remained empty. The blue fish bead sat inside it now, resting against the curved clay like a small piece of river sky. Sometimes, when the lamps were low and the night was very quiet, Menka thought he could hear, not from the cup but from memory, the soft turning of his father's wheel. He did not go searching for the hidden chamber again. Not at first. There was no need. The door beneath the house of blue columns had closed, and Seisha had not asked him to return to it. But the story of the chamber, as stories do even when no one speaks them directly, began to ripple through the city in disguised forms. People started coming to Menka not only with wounds, fevers, pains, and sleeplessness, but with objects. A woman brought a comb missing several teeth and said it had belonged to her sister. A carpenter brought a child's wooden horse with one leg broken. A soldier brought a strip of red cloth tied around his wrist and asked whether cloth could remember fear. A baker brought an empty bowl and said he did not know why he could not throw it away. Menka did not treat these objects as charms, curses, or sacred things. He treated them as doors. He would place each object between himself and the person who carried it, and he would ask gently what it had held, what it had witnessed, what sound belonged to it, what hand had touched it often, what memory became trapped whenever the object was hidden, and what truth might need to be written, spoken, washed, eaten, repaired, or finally allowed to move. Sometimes people wept. Sometimes they laughed in surprise. Sometimes they grew angry and left, then returned days later with softer eyes. Healing was not always pleasant. Rest was not always peaceful at first. A cramped hand aches when opened. A sealed room smells strange when air enters it. A name, after years of silence, may sound like a stranger before it sounds like home. One night, many weeks after the hidden chamber opened, Menka sat alone on his roof beneath a sky clear enough to show every star the desert had kept. The city was quiet. His patience had gone. The lamp beside him was low. On a mat before him lay three things: the clay cup, Com's drawing of boats, and a small strip of papyrus Seisha had sent that morning. On it she had written only one line: "Today I remembered her feet covered in flour." Menka smiled when he read it, because memory had begun to return to Seisha not only as grief, but as the untidy evidence of life. He placed the papyrus beside the cup and looked out over the Nile. The river moved in darkness. Boats slept along the banks. Somewhere a dog barked once and settled. From across the water came faint music, perhaps from a wedding, perhaps from a house where someone had decided that ordinary joy was allowed to continue despite all the reasons it might seem impossible. Menka closed his eyes and listened. For the first time in many years, he did not listen as a physician preparing to answer. He listened as men. The boy at the riverbank, the potter's son, the child held by his father's hands, the man who had spent a lifetime turning his survival into service and had only recently begun to understand that service without self becomes another kind of disappearance. The night wind moved over his face. He whispered his father's name, not to call him back, but to let the name move. Then he whispered his mother's name, then his own childhood name. Each one entered the dark above the river and seemed to become part of the air, neither lost nor held too tightly. That might have been the end of the story, or at least the end of the part that needed telling, if the Nile had been finished with him. But near the deepest part of that night, when the moon had not yet risen and the stars were brightest, the clay cup before Menka made a small sound. Not a crack, not a chime. A quiet touch, like a drop of water falling into an empty vessel. Menka opened his eyes. Inside the cup, the blue fish bead had begun to glow. At first the glow was faint. Then it deepened. The curved clay filled with darkness again. But this darkness did not show the passage beneath the house of blue columns. It showed reeds, tall reeds moving under moonlight, a narrow boat, a figure standing at the shore with a lamp, and beyond the reeds, where the river widened toward the north, a place Menka had not seen since childhood. His old village. He knew it at once. Not as it was now, perhaps. Not as it had been exactly. But as memory knows a place, through shape, smell, distance, and ache. The voice from the cup returned, softer than before. The names beneath the city have begun to rest. But one name waits where the flood first found you. Menka sat very still. Below him, the real Nile moved through the dark. Inside the cup, the remembered Nile waited. He understood then that the chamber beneath the city had not been the end of the road, only the first door. The next journey would not belong to Seisha, or Com, or Pazer, though perhaps they would walk some part of it with him. It would belong to the boy called Men, to the father whose body had never been returned, to the village where the river had first become both wound and teacher. Menka took the cup in both hands. It was cool, very cool, as if it had been filled from deep water. He looked toward the eastern darkness, where morning would not come for several hours, and he knew that he would have to travel south, back toward the place he had spent his life leaving behind without ever truly departing from it. For the first time, the thought did not fill him with dread. It filled him with a quiet fear, yes, but also with a tenderness he had not expected. Because perhaps there are places in the heart that cannot be healed from a distance. Perhaps some names must be returned not only to the river, but to the shore where they were first cried out. Mena held the cup until the image faded. Then he set it down gently on the mat. The blue fish bead grew dark again. The city slept. The river moved. And the physician of the Nile, who had helped others enter their hidden chambers, sat beneath the stars and understood that the deepest chamber had always been waiting inside his own memory. For 3 days after the clay cup showed him the reeds of his childhood village, Mena did not speak of the image to anyone. He continued his work as he always had, opening the gate at sunrise, preparing warm water, grinding herbs, listening to pulses, cleaning wounds, soothing fevers, and sitting with those who came to him carrying pains that had entered through the body and sorrows that had entered through doors no one else could see. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm of those days, beneath the careful movement of his hands and the calm patience of his voice, something in him had already turned toward the south. The village appeared to him in small moments. He saw it in the curve of a cup drying on the shelf. He heard it in the wooden groan of a boat against its rope. He smelled it when rain, rare and brief, touched the warm dust near the river and lifted from it that old scent of clay, reeds, and childhood mornings, when the world had not yet divided itself into what could be saved and what could only be remembered. At night, when the house grew quiet and the last patient had gone, Mena would sit before the clay cup and wait, not with impatience, but with the cautious respect of a man sitting beside a sleeping animal that might wake if called too harshly. The cup did not show the village again. It remained ordinary. The blue fish bead inside it held no light. The rim sat uneven beneath his thumb. And yet Mena knew the message had not withdrawn. Some messages come only once because they expect to be believed. On the 4th evening, Kam arrived with his son. The boy was perhaps 10 years old, with serious eyes, narrow shoulders, and the kind of careful posture children develop when they are not unhappy exactly, but have learned too early that the adults around them carry invisible weather. Kam introduced him as Hari, and although the boy bowed politely, his attention moved at once to the shelves of herbs, the jars, the folded linen, the clay cup, and the drawing of boats that his father had given Mena and that now hung on the wall near the river-facing window. "You drew that?" Hari asked his father. Kam seemed almost embarrassed. "I did." The boy studied the drawing, then looked at him with a seriousness that made Mena look away to hide a smile. "The ropes are good," Hari said. Kam's face softened. "I am pleased you approve." They sat together in the courtyard while evening settled around the house, and Mena served water cooled in a clay jar, dates, and a little bread with honey, because he had found that conversations between fathers and sons often moved more gently when the hands were given ordinary things to do. Kam spoke of his sleep, which had not become perfect, because no healing worth trusting pretends to be finished in a single night, but which had begun to return in pieces, like birds landing one by one after a storm. Some nights he slept until dawn. Some nights he woke and watched the wall, but the numbers no longer walked across it with the same authority. Some mornings he remembered the docks from childhood. Some mornings he remembered nothing at all, and even that, he said, had become less frightening, because he was beginning to understand that rest did not always need to leave proof of itself behind. Hari listened carefully. At last the boy asked, "Did you really forget how the boat sounded?" Khan looked at his son for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "How can a person forget a sound?" Menka watched the question enter Khan more deeply than any physician's instruction could have done. "By listening too long to other things," Khan answered. Hari seemed to consider this. Then he nodded, as though the answer, while sad, was acceptable. When the boy went to the river wall to watch a beetle move along the stone, Khan leaned toward Menka and lowered his voice. "I am afraid I will forget again." Menka looked toward Hari, who was now crouched near the wall, wholly absorbed by the beetle's progress. "You may," he said. Khan turned to him, troubled. "That is your comfort." "It is the truth," Menka replied, "and truth is a better beginning than comfort that cannot survive the weak." Khan lowered his eyes. Menka continued more gently. "You may forget again, because life is full, and duties return, and the world is skilled at making the urgent seem more real than the important. But forgetting once does not mean you must remain forgotten to yourself forever." Khan breathed out slowly. "And if I feel it happening?" "Then return to a sound," Menka said. "The ropes, your son's footsteps, the scratch of your own reed pen when you draw instead of count. Choose one sound that belongs to your life rather than your duty, and let it call you back before you vanish too far." Khan nodded, and for a while they sat without speaking. The river moved beyond the wall. Hari laughed suddenly, because the beetle had flown away just when he believed he had understood its destination. The sound rose into the evening, bright and brief, and Khan turned toward it with such attention that Menka knew he was trying to keep it. Later, after they had gone, Seisha arrived. She did not come in the manner of a noblewoman visiting a physician, with servants ahead of her and messages sent before her arrival, but quietly, with Pazer beside her and a plain shawl over her hair. The broken ibis hung from a cord at her neck. Its damaged wing had been mended with gold. The repair did not hide the break. Instead, a thin golden line followed the old fracture, catching the light whenever she moved, so that the wound itself had become part of the little bird's beauty. Pazer carried a covered basket and walked loudly enough that Menka heard him from the gate. Seisha noticed Menka noticing and said, "He has become impossible to ignore." Pazer stood straighter, unable to decide whether this was praise or complaint. "It is a beginning," Menka said. Inside the basket were figs, a small jar of preserved lemon, and a folded cloth embroidered with tiny blue fish along one edge. "Old Uncle Morning continues to live," Seisha said, placing the cloth on the table with an expression of grave importance. "He has survived grief, ceremonies, overfeeding by Pazer, and being named by a child with strong opinions." "That is no small achievement," Menka replied. Seisha smiled. It was not the smile of a woman who had forgotten sorrow. It was the smile of someone who had learned that sorrow need not occupy every room at once. They sat in the courtyard while the sky darkened, and Seisha spoke of the house of blue columns, of how she had opened Merritt's room in the morning and allowed the shutters to be drawn back, of how the dust in the air had looked almost golden, of how the first thing she remembered upon entering was not the fever bed, but Merit hiding under it months earlier because she had broken a painted bowl and believed she could live beneath the bed forever. Pazer added, with great seriousness, that she had lasted less than an hour because she became hungry. Seisha laughed. Then she cried. Then she continued speaking. Menka did not interrupt either the laughter or the tears. He understood now, even more than before, that healing did not mean grief would no longer enter the room, but that when it entered, it would no longer find every chair reserved for it. When the moon rose, Seisha noticed the clay cup on the shelf. She looked at it for a long while. "It has called you again," she said. Menka did not ask how she knew. "Yes." "Where?" He hesitated, though he did not know why. Perhaps because naming the village aloud would make the journey unavoidable. Perhaps because a childhood place, once spoken before witnesses, becomes less private and more real. "South," he said, "to the village where I was born." Seisha's expression changed. Calm had learned through dreams, Pazer through courage, Seisha through grief, but Seisha, more than either of them, understood what it meant to be called toward the place where loss first entered the body. "Will you go?" she asked. Menka looked toward the river. "I think I already began going the night the cup appeared." Pazer moved closer. "Is there another chamber there?" "I do not know." "Will it be dangerous?" "I do not know." The boy frowned. "You say that often for a wise man." Menka smiled. "Wisdom is partly learning how much there is not to know." Pazer did not look entirely convinced. Seisha touched the golden line on the ibis wing. "You should not go alone." Menka looked back at her. "That may be true." "I will come," Pazer said immediately. Seisha turned to him. "You will not decide that before understanding what is being asked." "I understand enough," he said, though he clearly did not. Menka studied the boy. "And what do you think is being asked?" Pazer looked from Seisha to Menka to the clay cup. "You helped my lady go into the place she was afraid of," he said. "And you helped the scribe, and maybe now someone should walk loudly behind you so you do not disappear into your own silence." The courtyard became still. Seisha looked at Pazer with surprise, then with something like pride. Menka lowered his eyes for a moment. The boy had spoken simply, but not lightly. "That," Menka said at last, "is a strong answer." Pazer's face warmed. Seisha folded her hands in her lap. "I cannot go south," she said, and her voice held regret but not shame. "Not yet. There are rooms in my own house I am still learning how to enter." "That is also a journey," Menka said. "But I can send Pazer if he is permitted," she continued, "not as a servant sent to carry bags, but as a boy learning not to become a shadow." Pazer looked at her quickly. Menka saw the moment enter him. A different kind of name being given. Not servant, not errand boy, witness, companion, learner, a boy allowed to make sound. "We will ask Calm as well," Menka said. Pazer seemed both pleased and disappointed, as boys often do when they discover that bravery may require sharing. The next morning, Calm came before the heat rose, and when Menka told him what the cup had shown, the scribe listened without interrupting, his face becoming more serious with every word. At the mention of the village south along the river, Khan looked toward the drawing of boats on the wall. "I cannot leave the record hall for many days," he said slowly. "No," Menka replied. "But I can come for the beginning," Khan said. "I can travel with you as far as the old southern ferry, where Temple grain boats sometimes stop, and from there I can return before my absence becomes a scandal large enough to interest people who enjoy scandals." Menka nodded. "That may be enough." Khan looked at him. "Enough for what?" "I do not know yet." Khan almost smiled. "You say that often for a wise man." "So I have been told." By afternoon, the journey had taken shape in the quiet, practical way journeys do, when the decision has already been made in the heart before the hands begin preparing. Menka chose a small riverboat owned by a fisherman who had once brought his daughter to be treated for a fever, and who insisted, upon hearing only that the physician needed to travel south, that the boat would be ready before dawn, and that payment could be argued about later, preferably never. The boat was narrow but steady, with a woven canopy for shade, a low place for storing bundles, and a sail patched so many times that it looked like a history of other journeys stitched together in faded cloth. Menka packed lightly: herbs for fever, honey, clean linen, a small knife, a needle, thread, 2 cups, the clay cup, a spare robe, a blanket, blue lotus oil, a little bread, dates, and after hesitating, his father's cup wrapped in a cloth beside Kam's drawing and Seisha's note about Merit's flower-covered feet. Pazer arrived at sunset carrying far too much: a sleeping mat, 3 bundles of food, a small knife, a water flask, a second water flask because he did not trust the first, a spare belt, a chipped toy crocodile given to him by someone in the servants' quarters, and the blue fish cloth Seisha had embroidered. Menka looked at the pile. "Are we traveling south or moving your entire life to another city?" Pazer looked at the bundles. "I was told to prepare." "You have prepared for conquest. I can leave the second flask." "You may leave many things." Pazer sighed, but after some negotiation, most of it remained behind, although he insisted on bringing the toy crocodile because it had, according to him, an expression that encouraged caution. Kam arrived later with his writing case, a roll of blank papyrus, a small pouch of ink, and Hori, who had demanded to walk with them to the boat at dawn so he could see whether the ropes sounded different in the morning. That night, Menka slept only a little. Not because he was afraid, though fear was present, sitting quietly in one corner of him. Not because he regretted the journey, but because memory, once invited, had begun opening doors without waiting for his permission. He dreamed again of his father's wheel. This time, however, the wheel was turning not in the old courtyard, but beside the river after the flood, half submerged in mud. His father stood beside it, shaping clay that was too wet to hold form, and each time the cup collapsed, he laughed, not with mockery, but with the easy patience of a man who believed failed shapes returned to the hand as teaching. In the dream, young men stood nearby, angry. "Why do you laugh?" he asked, "when the cup will not stay?" His father looked at him and answered, "Because the clay has not left us, only asked to begin again." Menka woke before dawn with tears on his face. He did not wipe them away immediately. He lay in the dim room and let them cool on his skin while the city slept. And for a few breaths, he allowed himself to feel not like a physician preparing for a sacred task, but like a son who missed his father. Then he rose. The house was blue with early darkness. He washed. He dressed. He tied the clay cup in a cloth and placed it in his bag. At the gate, before opening it, he turned back and looked at the room facing the river, the shelves of herbs, the folded linen, the low stools where patients sat, the wall where Kam's boats now hung, and the small places where so many human troubles had come to rest for a while. He realized he had never left the house for more than a day since making it his own. It had become not only his dwelling, but his way of being useful. To close the gate behind him felt almost like stepping out of a name. But then he remembered the inscription beneath the sleeping eye. Your own name will show you the way. Outside, the eastern sky had begun to pale. Pazer waited in the lane, standing beside a bundle much smaller than the one he had brought the evening before, though still larger than necessary. Kam stood nearby with Hori, who was rubbing sleep from his eyes while pretending not to be tired. The fisherman's boat waited at the river steps, dark against the silver water. Seisha had sent a servant with figs, bread, and a small sealed jar of sweet oil for the journey. There was also a message, written in her careful hand. For the road that leads back to the child you were. Menka folded the note and placed it close to the clay cup. They walked to the boat as the first birds began calling from the reeds. Hori ran ahead to inspect the ropes. Kam followed more slowly, watching his son with an expression that held both love and the sadness of having almost missed too many such mornings. Pazer stepped onto the boat with great care, then immediately tried to look as if he had done so with confidence. Menka boarded last. The fisherman pushed away from the steps. The rope slid free of the post with a low, familiar creak. Hori looked at his father. Kam closed his eyes and listened. The boat entered the current. The city began to drift behind them. Temples, walls, rooftops, palms, smoke, voices, and the house beside the river slowly became part of the morning distance. Ahead, the Nile opened southward, carrying them toward villages, reeds, old flood marks, and the shore where a frightened child had once heard his name called through dark water. For a while, no one spoke. The sail lifted softly. The river took them, and Menka, sitting beneath the patched canopy with the clay cup resting in his bag, felt the strange and gentle terror of returning not to the past itself, because the past cannot be entered again, but to the place where the past had first learned his name.